Hello, everyone. Good evening, and welcome to yet another episode of Campus Debates by the Debate Association of Kenya. My name is Mercy Vugutsa, and I will be your host for this show. If you are a loyal viewer, this is an official welcome back to Campus Debates, and Monday night at 8 p.m., we always have a treat for you. And if this is your first time viewing, thank you for tuning in to KTN Home at Campus Debates. Few things you need to know about Campus Debates. It's a show where young people get to gather together to share on intellectual perspectives about issues that exist within society. Could be issues affecting me, affecting you, or anyone else that you know on a local perspective, regional, or even international perspective. Isn't that beautiful? But the greatest thing about it is all from the perspectives of young people. We get to give them a platform and a voice to share their opinions, ideas, and possible solutions to the problems that we get to surface in this debate. That's interesting, right? A few things you need to know about Season 2. It's a tabulation system where you get to garner points if you win. That is 3 points. If you lose, you only get 1 point. But at the same time, judges take note of your speaker scores. The better you speak, the higher your scores. And the higher your speaker scores, the more possibility for you to be safe when the knockout rounds come around. But knockout rounds are just around the corner. Could be the next episode that you watch. I don't know. Now, a few things you need to understand about this particular show tonight. We have amazing speakers joining us on the platform. And from Side Proposition, we are joined by St. Paul's University. And from Side Opposition, we are joined by the United States International University, USIU. I will allow the speakers a few seconds to introduce themselves to you. Something outside of debate. I know most people say debaters don't have lives or don't have any other thing to do. So it's about time you get to know your speakers outside of their debate comfort zone. I will allow the proposers to start with the introductions.
Hello, my name is Gloria Bon from St. Paul's University. I'm just a STEM girl trying to navigate the world of communication.
She's just a STEM girly trying to navigate the world of communication. Interesting, right?
Hello everyone, I'm Winsley Owaka from St. Paul's University. I love debating, and apart from debating, I also love listening to SDA songs.
He has decided the one thing outside of debate is listening to SDA songs. I mean, that's his opinion, but it's fine. Side Opposition.
Hello, my name is Joshua. I come from USIU. I'm a computer science major. Apart from debate and doing computer science, my interests are I love ice skating. I've been doing this since I was a kid, and yeah, it's just something I do in my free time.
Ice skating. Outside of debate, he's still competitive, but it's fine.
Hi, my name is Angel. I'm also a USIU student. I do data science and analytics, and in my free time, I make jewelry.
Ooh, she makes jewelry. I think before us, we already have an amazing set of speakers ready for you. Some of them want to actually express their communication capacities. Others just love the nature of debating, and I think that's interesting enough for you to sit at the edge of your seat, eagerly waiting for them to give you a debate. But before they do, I would I'll welcome the judges to introduce themselves and tell us something interesting about them as a panel.
Thank you so much, Buguta. Hi, everyone. I'm Terry Sandimu. An interesting thing about me is that I love to do things for the plot. My expectations for this round are that each and every one of us, the speakers, the audience, at least take away something regardless of the outcome. So to our speakers, all the best, and to the audience, take notes.
She's part of the crowd that does it for the plot, I mean.
Hello everyone, my name is Perez Mono and I am really interested in linguistics. So one thing I'm going to be keeping tabs in this round is any speaker who says the current status quo, minus 10 your speaker scores.
The chair has decided they are going to deduct you 10 points if you say current status quo. It's going to be hard for these debaters, but it's fine.
Hello everyone, my name is Caleb Masongo Mweri. I am a student at Mount Kenya University main campus. Something interesting about me is that I'm an enthusiast about martial art, more so the mental part of martial art. I'm mostly enlightened with matters talking about leadership and governance, and I'm also an author. and our project is almost through. It's called The Alchemy of the Invisible Ties. It talks about matters about philosophy and the end of the other realm. I wish to see a very good and competitive debate.
The judges are ready, the speakers are ready. The only person holding you back is me. So without further ado, let me read for you the motion for tonight. This House believes that charities and humanitarian aid organizations should not use images of graphics suffering in their advertising campaigns. This House believes that charities and humanitarian aid organizations should not use images of graphics suffering in their advertising campaigns. That is interesting, right? I will welcome the first speaker side proposition to begin off their case. Hear, hear.
My time starts in 1, 2, 3. So this House believes that charities and humanitarian aid organizations should not use images of graphic sufferings in their advertising campaigns. In our world, we highly regard humanity, and we also happen to value transparency. But before we get into it, let me start by enlightening you what the motion is about. So charities and humanitarian aid organizations refers to the non-profit organizations that provide assistance and support to those in need, whether it's natural disasters, conflicts, or other humanitarian crises. Images of graphic sufferings. This involves use of photographics or visuals that depict extreme suffering, distress, or trauma, often involving vulnerable individuals such as children, refugees, or victims of violence. And what are advertising campaigns? This includes any promotional or marketing material used by charities and humanitarian organizations to raise awareness, soliciting donations, or advocate for a cause. It encompasses various mediums such as print, digital, social media, and broadcasting channels. So in our world, as I've told you before, that we value humanity, but we also value transparency. And how are we going to achieve transparency while not sharing the images of these people in their vulnerable status? So one of them is using infographics. By infographics, we are able to raise awareness and also highlight urgency. By doing that, we can effectively convey the urgency of the situation, prompting swift action from the donors and policymakers. Another way we can do that is by highlighting the urgency and transparency, and also giving people the freedom of expression without necessarily putting one of the stakeholders, which are the victims, in a position where they're not able to speak for themselves or decide for themselves because they are in a state where they cannot make solid decisions. They are vulnerable. That is a point that you should put in consideration. And as while the other world will come to tell you why they should share the images because of, I don't know, to get more financial support, to create more awareness. I've told that in our world, we'll do that by infographics. And in case you're wondering what is infographics, these are a powerful tool for conveying complex information in a visually engaging and easily digestible format or information. So here's why sharing the images of these people in their vulnerable situation is a bad thing. One, it exploits their suffering. Exploiting this pain and vulnerable individuals reduce them to objects of fundraising purposes rather than respecting their dignity and urgency. How are you going to tell me that you're really fighting for this person while you're using them to get the money in your pockets? And as we know that transparency is an issue, most of these organizations, because they're non-profits, they're not taxed, so they use these formats as a way to get more money in their pockets, and just a percentage of what they get to help the people that need to be helped. So another reason as to why it's a bad thing, it's desensitization. Over time, sharing can desensitize audiences, leading to diminished empathy or emotional responses. So as we know that we get jaded when one thing is shared over and over again, we get tired and over it. It's just the same way our government gets us tired and jaded over some issues where we raise awareness about a certain thing, but the more we complain about it, the more we just talk about it, it becomes a mere talk instead of a point of action. Another point is stigmatization and stereotype. It can promote negative stereotypes, and we've had the cases or scenarios when if it's a victim from a terrorist country, you'll be told that go back to your country, you look like a certain people, you look like a terrorist and whatnot. And these are things that we are trying to get rid of in our world. And as a case study is that research has shown that exposure to graphic images of suffering can have negative psychological effects, particularly on vulnerable audiences such as children and survivors of trauma. A study published in the Journal of Consumer Research found that viewing distressing images can lead to feelings of helplessness and guilt rather than motivating action or empathy. So over time, me as someone who's not affected or maybe directly, seeing these images, I'll start feeling guilty, like why am I in a better condition over the other person? Why do I have A and B and C and the other person doesn't have that? Rather than actually me being able to do something about it, it becomes something. And maybe if it's being shared on news, I'll just switch off to the next channel rather than seeing the same news because I'm like, oh, these things have been shared over and over again. So in our world, we hold humanity on a high regard, and we also happen to value transparency. And I believe that with this, we're able to achieve both. Thank you.
We have heard from side proposition. They tell you there are other ways to actually offer urgency and information to people through infographics. That is side proposition. We welcome opposition to respond to proposition and at the same time begin their argument. Hear, hear.
My speech in 3, 2, 1. Usually, when you're dealing with individuals who are in an acute position where they're actively suffering, it's best to act within the best interest of those individuals, right? At the point in which, for example, kids cannot consent because they're not of the age to consent, the principal justification is you act within the best interest of those children to ensure that they're actively doing well, they're actively developing, et cetera, et cetera. Their motivation is that they think that these people cannot consent because they're in an acute position where they're actively suffering, then we do nothing. Their alternative is infographics, which its best is a couple of graphs, a couple of numbers, et cetera, right? Let me just engage on a point that they just gave you. They told you about the whole thing of desensitization, where at the point in which we show them the graphic images, at some point people will stop caring. I can concede that won't happen on their side because people won't care in the first place. You cannot give me some numbers and some statistics and magically I'll care about something that's happening on a distant place. I'll show you the impact of actually using images, why humans actually actively value images in the first place, and why they're a better emotive communicator to actually create a level of solvency that they cannot reproduce with infographics. Understand, the goal is to raise funds for a cause. Let me just go at the top, right? Understand the nature of these humanitarian organizations. I can see that these are nonprofit organizations which by law are required to reinvest a majority of their revenue through donations and into eternal operations, right? So majority of the donations that they actually get, they're legally obliged to reinvest that into internal operations, for example, donating, giving medicine, et cetera, et cetera. And only a small percentage of that is actually given back into paying vendors and paying employees. So we can then assume that these orgs are actually invested in helping those who are currently suffering. And even if that was not true, what exactly is the alternative? At the point in which these organizations doesn't necessarily exist, who else is necessarily going to help these individuals? At the point in which they're suffering, it probably means the government is taking care of them. There's no other party that's taking care of them. It's only these NGOs that exist. Principal justification for our side, right? These people are suffering because their governments are not helping them, and no other party seems to be invested in helping them in the first place. This means that this is justified on the principle of urgency, i.e. people are suffering right now, and we need to allow these organizations with the greatest capacity to help to actually use all the tools within their arsenal to actually help, not just using infographics that people necessarily don't care about. So why exactly do photos elicit a stronger response compared to things like eyewitness testimonies or even infographics that they like to tell you, right? Using images is the best motivator for things like donation, right? Understand that a person's primary sensory organ is their eyes, the same way a dog's primary sensory organ is their nose, for example, right? Evolutionarily, we're built to trust what we see. That's why the saying, seeing is believing, right? We inherently trust the things that we necessarily see, right? We're able to better then relate with the humanity of these individuals. So, for example, if I see an image of somebody suffering in Gaza, I can see, oh yes, they have eyes the same way I have eyes, they have hands the same way I have hands, and they're bleeding the same way I bleed. You do not get that emotive communication on their end, right? The graphic nature makes it stick in your mind longer, and it's important because we live in an attention economy where different different forms of media are fighting for your attention. Let me just engage with them. They talk about that whole thing of re-traumatization. At the point in which you show these individual people graphic images, it might traumatize them or maybe create some negative emotion, right? We're willing to take that on the worst case scenario because what is the balance, right? On our side, you do get that a bit of re-traumatization, but understand, we still create a level of solvency for the people who are actively suffering. On their side, you may not get that re-traumatization, but guess what? Those people are suffering in silence. They have no support from the people who can actually help them, right? So let me just go into that, right? I told you that we live within an attention economy. So the only way for these organizations to actually capture the attention of the audience is to publicize the graphic nature of the crisis at hand. It's also important because you approach them on places like social media through, for example, scrolling past TikToks, making them see these images will shock people, making them feel empathy for the suffering, as well as giving them a convenient link to donate. Understand this whole notion of what you call advertising a lot of these crises, right? You show the image, then you show them a convenient link or a number to call so you can donate. It's right there at the end, right? So this is why news as a means to communicate these images is not effective, right? It can show you the crisis, but it wastes the emotion generated by these images by not providing people with a means to do anything. You just watch the news passively, then you switch the channel and you do nothing about it. Even at the point in which you care, you don't have necessarily any mechanism to do anything. Secondly, news media is susceptible to political bias. Conservatives are less likely to believe and empathize with the suffering of children that they see on CNN because it's coming from CNN. Conservatives believe that CNN necessarily lies. This is why necessarily advertising from these these nonprofit organizations is necessarily important. We believe that these charity organizations play a pivotal role in getting people to care about these crises because it's coming from an impartial body. It's not necessarily politicized the same way the news is necessarily politicized, right? So actively ensuring solvency for this issue that they cannot necessarily show you, right? Understand that people are more likely, that I've proven to you, people are more likely to believe in images over any other source of information. This is actually important in order to counteract the propaganda that is surrounding a lot of this crisis in regards to whether the crisis is even happening in the first place, right? Understand that the point in which I don't necessarily know what's happening in Gaza, I'm susceptible to a lot of propaganda that's telling me that the crisis isn't even happening in the first place, right? But at the point in which I see kids actively dying, people bleeding in Gaza, I don't have any option but necessarily to believe that there's a crisis happening and I must do anything. At the point in which I believe that this is happening. Secondly, understand that people with the greatest capacity to help are far away from the actual issue, right? Understand, those with the most capital who exist within the West are distinct. They're very far away from Gaza, for example, or Central Africa, where a lot of the things are actually happening, right? We close that boundary by giving them an easy alternative for them to actually donate, to actually create a greater sense of solvency for these situations. Understand, at the point in which people in the West do watch the news, they don't necessarily know where to go to actually donate, they don't know who to trust, et cetera, we solve this. But also on a principle level, understand that a lot of these conflicts, for example, conflicts happening in the Middle East, are motivated by geopolitical forces, right? Motivated by things that the West is necessarily taking part and parcel of, right? Understand the wars that motivated things like oil extraction within the Middle East, right? Understand, these wars are being fought in the name of the people living in the West. The taxes that were extracted from the people living in the West, or those that are being invested into these crises that are killing people, right? We think it was necessarily principally justified for these people to then donate in order to actually solve this crisis that their tax dollars helped fund in the first place. With that, I rest my case. Thank you.
The debaters have brought their A game for this particular debate. From side proposition, we are told that the biggest argument you can have from their side is that if you show these graphic images, then people will become traumatized and the mental health issues that actually follow from these images being shown. The alternative is to have infographics, and they think that would actually solve the problem of urgency better. From side opposition, they argue that most people resonate very well with the images that they are currently exposed to. And because of this, then, they are more incentivized to donate or even to have any form of empathy towards the people that they are currently being shown that suffer these consequences. I don't know which side swayed you. I don't know what opinion that you have currently. Feel free to message us on X at KTN Home with the hashtag Campus Debates. Thank you for choosing to tune in with us continuously, even after our short break. I hope you're as excited for the second half of the debate just as I am. If you missed the first half, Proposition told us that the main reason why we should actually not have these graphics is because it affects other people mentally by them seeing these images. Furthermore, they tell us that infographics are a better solution. But side opposition tell us that you actually resonate more with what you see. And if you see someone suffering, you're more likely to be more empathetic or be incentivized to even offer more help. And they tell you that there's a principal justification for humanitarian aid organizations to actually show these graphic images for their advertising campaigns. Now, for me not to steal the show, I will allow the second speaker side Proposition to continue with their argument. Here.
My speech begins in 3, 2, 1. As the second speaker from proposer's side, I fail to understand how the opposers in their world will respect the privacy of the victims, because it's always said that even despite the low levels that we are facing, we should always adhere and always respect the privacy of an individual. In their world, when they showcase this, everybody is at least, it's like they are going against and they're violating the privacy of an individual. So if they can answer that, I'll be waiting to hear. And to say, as the proposer's side, we again stick that these graphics should not be used, because just as the first speaker did clearly put it out, it will affect people psychologically. Apart from that, it will lower the dignity and respect of an individual. Try to imagine that you, as the viewer who is watching, there is a photo of yours that was taken back in days, and when you again come to meet it, when at least your lifestyle has improved, will this affect your dignity? Tend to believe on that. Secondly, we believe that in emotional manipulation, these images of suffering can evoke strong emotional responses, which are likely to lead to guilt-driven donations rather than genuine empathy. We also tend to believe that it will also lead to re-traumatization, in that people who have experienced similar suffering may be re-traumatized by such imagery, causing harm to them more than good. But always those who are doing public relations, all the things, adverts that we are doing, or when we are trying to brand ourselves, we always measure on the positive things that will at least bring change. Why do we show the negative sides that instead bring harm more than good? In their world, they did clearly show us that when they share these photos, they'll tend to be of benefit to the marginalized people or the vulnerable. But it's so sad that research that was carried out by investigative team did clearly shows that most of these humanitarian organizations, the funds that they receive from the sponsors that at least give them fundings to at least support this, they don't reach to the vulnerable people, they don't reach to the commoners who are down there. It's only just a few people who are selected who tend to come and at least benefit from this. Again, we as the proposing side, we tend to believe that as a country, because most of the third world countries that at least try to share these photos to get donations, there are still countries that at least need to attract investors. Which investor will come to a country where it's known that this country is always prone to war, this country is poverty-stricken, but they always tend to come and invest where at least they'll see a positive change from the things that they do invest in such areas. Again, there is a research that was carried in 2013 in which one of the UK-based charity organization did feature a graphic image of a malnourished child alongside the slogan that I am African, this is my story. So you find that after this was featured, most of the racists, those who are racist, they tend to use these features or these photos to at least tend to exploit us, because they use it to hide their hate behind these photos. That is why you find that all of the time this issue to do with racism, it escalates, but they bring it in an indirect and hidden way. Because of these graphic photos that we share, we are ensuring that transparency is achieved in our world by, first of all, when statistics are there, through using the infographics that the first speaker did put in place. Graphics are there. There are data that at least there are statistics that at least can be checked into and at least they can be proven. Secondly, we are encouraging that the recording should be done, but let these eyes, people's appearance be sealed in a way that there is sound that is proven. And let's say like in crime related cases, you'll find that those who are underage, their faces are not, should not, and are not always allowed to be revealed to the public, because it helps to at least avoid certain issues that may affect an individual. So when these photos are at least portrayed to the public, that everybody can get access to them, you'll find that they tend to affect somebody even psychologically. Again, you find that when these photos are shared, you'll find that most of them tend to portray the bad side of our countries, to an extent that they always portray a country as a loose country, where the good sides are hidden. They are not portrayed at all. So you'll find that when these issues, they'll tend to at least like scare people. Like even you'll find that a country, maybe it has so many, very, very good tourist sites, but because there is poverty that is affecting it, it will scare away tourists, because tourists will believe that in a country that is full of poverty, there is a lot of crime. And it tends to at least avoid the good side of our country. By giving all those points, I feel and I believe that we've annexed the floor. Thank you.
I think that was sufficient for side proposition. They've given countless amounts of proof as to why graphic images would ideally be bad for societies and even the victims as a whole. Let's hear what side opposition has to say about that. We welcome the speaker. Here.
I begin my speech in 3, 2, 1, and mostly in my speech I'm going to be talking about what exactly is wrong with the alternative that we've been given by side government. And please note that the second speaker did not at all defend the alternative. They simply attacked like what's wrong with the graphics. And I'll give you why exactly the flaws that they point out are things that A, are not all true, and B, that some of which we are willing to accept in our world, right? Okay, so to begin with, the alternative that they give us, the use of infographics. First of all, we have already portrayed to you that the circulatability of media that causes shock value is necessary in order to get people to donate, right? They talk about highlighting the urgency, but panel, please note that to highlight the urgency, you need to be able to reach people, right? People do not help because they are not aware. We need to reach a wider audience, right? You are unlikely, please note that in addition to what my partner has said, you are unlikely to even be interacting with these infographics in the first place at the point at which you are not aware of them, because what the alternatives are usually in media that gives you the awareness of these things. For you to be able to find it, you have to be aware of the situation, as opposed to a post by a humanitarian organization that would pop up in your feed that would have shock value, and you'd want to know what's going on here. Why is this child bleeding? And that's why we feel that this is the best method, right? Now, let's go into the problems that they come and give us. They come and they tell us that victims cannot speak for themselves because they are vulnerable, and so to do this is to disrespect their humanity. We do not think that this is the case. When people are vulnerable, you tend to act in their best interest. That is the way to deal with the situation, right? They want to propose that victims wish to suffer in silence, which we do not think is the case, right? When you have to reach to act in people's best interest, and you know that this person is suffering, as a humanitarian organization, what you want to do is to take away their suffering the best way you can. You want to reach the most people, gain the most funds, and be at the best place to be able to cater for them, right? And so we do not necessarily believe that their world is something that the victims would want, right? At the end of the day, these people being portrayed in the media want for their communities to be liberated from their suffering. That is what we truly believe, and unless they can show us otherwise, they fail to prove that. Second of all, we tell you that charities and humanitarian organizations, they tell you that charities and humanitarian organizations are reducing these people to profit-making mechanisms, and it promotes negative stereotypes. We feel this is, first of all, incorrect. This is, perhaps if we were talking about news houses and media houses, we can say this, right? However, we forget that the aim of these organizations existing is for them to be able to help these communities. You say only a small percentage is given to them. First of all, even if a small percentage is given to them, should they get more aid, this small percentage increases, which benefits them. Additionally, they have an incentive to want the best for these communities. Why is this? People tend to donate to organizations that they think are credible. If they can actively show that they are helping these communities, it only enables them to get more funds, because people will think that this is the channel through which I should be taking my funds, right? They want these funds for sustainability, for them to continue to exist, for them to continue to help these communities, and even if it is for personal benefit, we think at the point at which the disadvantaged groups are helped, it is okay. In the end, it is for their well-being, right? There are harms that they note that we think are necessary, and this is why. Before I go into that, please note that the reason that we are saying graphic advertisement should exist is because of shock value, circulatability. We feel they also portray the urgency of the situation, right? As my partner has told you, people are much more likely to buy into graphic photos as opposed to other forms of communication that exist, right? People tend to readily believe these things when you're told, and I feel through any other form of media that informs them, they don't understand the urgency of the situation. Like, you could think, okay, maybe there's some people being killed here, but you don't see the extent of it. When you see that buildings are being destroyed, when you see that people are being killed, when you see all of these things happening in real time, it's kind of something clicks inside of you that makes you connect to them on a human level, and that's why we think that this is necessary, right? They come and they say children and survivors of trauma will be affected. First of all, please note that on these platforms where this media is being shared, there are already mitigatory mechanisms, right? There is sensitization, there is certain media will not be shown to people who are below the age of 18. Yes, we do concede that to some degree this media is still going to be consumed by them, but we think at the point at which it is to such great benefit to these communities, that's something we are willing to concede to. We also think that promotion of a negative stereotype, yes, perhaps may happen. However, we think that it is likely to exist either way. Social biases like racism will still exist. Please note that media houses will still exist. These things will still be documented. It just won't be done by humanitarian organizations. And we tell you that the utility in humanitarian organizations doing this is that they're actually able to get funds that go back to these communities, as opposed to when it's only through media channels, which are just like informing people of the situation, but they do not have as great an impact towards that community, first of all, and they actually have an incentive to be pushing a narrative. So we think it's worse in their world, and at least in our world, they get some form of benefits, right? They come and they say we did not show that people are actually benefiting from these situations and that these people are just going to eat this money. Please, first of all, note that, as I told you, they have an incentive to want to look like they're doing something, and so they will do some things in order to be able to get more funds. Second of all, please note that with the Gaza situation, how many people have been reached? How many people in this world have seen these graphic pieces of media on their screens, and it has led them to want to do something about the situation. It has led them to want to donate something. This is the biggest way through which these humanitarian organizations can reach people in this day and age, especially when we're talking about in an international platform, and that's why we think they're necessary. They come and they say that it's only some people who benefit, not everyone who benefits. Please, I think that this is a weak argument, because it's not mutually exclusive. Even in their world, it's only a certain number of people who benefit. At least in our world, when we can get the most funding, there's more people who benefit from this, and therefore we think that their side does not, their alternative is not justified. With that, I rest my case.
Well. Debaters have a knack of pulling you in and actually catching and grabbing your attention. And I think that is what has happened with the entirety of the debate that we have had. Side proposition argues that this is actually a violation of people's privacy, that victims ought to be protected rather than be shown on the limelight and used as objects to like ends to means, right? But side opposition argues and tells you, provided these victims are getting any level of benefit from this whole structure, then it's okay. They're willing to concede to these harms that could exist, provided people benefit. And for humanitarian organizations, it's equally okay, because they need to show that this money is going somewhere for them to get more money. I don't know which side swayed you. I don't know which argument is actually something you bought into, but it's about time you tell us. So comment on X at KTN Home with the hashtag Campus Debates, or if you want to message us on WhatsApp, the number is 0759 434389. 0759 434389. Finally, a quick question to you before we go on a short break. How exposed are you to the infographics that exist within society compared to graphic images? Do you think you resonate better with graphic images? And welcome back. Thank you for hanging on after the short break. I know you had a treat, and I know you were able to marinate with the points that were given from side opposition and side proposition. If you're joining us after the break, few things that happened in the beginning of the debate. We are talking about the idea that humanitarian aid organizations using graphic images to advertise and for advertising campaigns. Do you think it's okay for that to happen, or do you think it shouldn't happen in society? That has been the idea of the first half and the second half of the debate. For right now, the judges have decided that the debaters are not convincing enough with the 4 speeches that they have given. Because of this, they have decided to ask them a question each to determine whether they will be swayed or not, whether the verdict will change or not. With that, we welcome the judges to ask a question to side opposition and side proposition.
Thank you once again, Vugutsa. My question goes to the government side. The 2 major subjects that I've gotten from your argument is 1, dignity and privacy. Yeah? So that is your reason for not using these graphic images. So my question is, how do these organizations get more donations without necessarily using these graphic images?
And now over to opposition.
Thank you again, Vukusa, for the chance given to ask the team up the question. So, team up, under the Declaration of Human Rights, you are supposed to protect the human rights at all costs, with or without whatsoever that is, right? So how then do you justify the potential emotional manipulation of the donors through the images of graphic suffering? Thank you.
Interesting questions from the panel. I think the responses will clearly sway the judges to go either opposition or proposition. But without further ado, we welcome side proposition with 1 minute to respond. Here.
Answering the question that have been asked, we did clearly indicate in our speech while you were giving out the understanding of infographics, that infographics, it only does not use images, but it has statistics which can be analyzed, then the findings can be found. Apart from that, it has recordings, meaning there are recordings that are taken, maybe sound recordings, or it can use past information through channeling them into like a storytelling kind of format, where at least all the problems that this individual undergo, they are channeled here, and through this or after analysis of all these statistics, because records are there and they can be checked into and the outcomes can be found. So this will at least encourage other people to give in donations to the malnourished or even the vulnerable. Thank you.
So the question was with regard to how we justify emotional manipulation of donors, and we do not think our side favors emotional manipulation. Yes, we are not emotionally manipulating people by showing them an urgent situation. The situation is being depicted as is. We are showing it in real time. It is being portrayed as it is. It is simply pushing the idea that this situation is urgent and that people are actively suffering to this extent, right? We think that this is necessary for people to actually understand the degree to which these people are suffering, as opposed to on their side where they're going to use numbers, which dehumanizes people and reduces them to a statistic, right? When you see 6% of people are being affected by an issue, you do not see how much these people are being affected, whereas on our world, you see how much these people are being affected and how urgent the situation is, regardless of how many people are being affected. And with that, yeah, I think I've answered your question.
Quick question to our audience. When Kenya was struggling with drought and the president was calling for funds and donations from people and citizens all around the country, do you think it would have been favorable for the state to use images of people directly suffering from the drought, or them giving you numbers and percentages of the people currently struggling with the drought areas? What would have swayed you to give donations to these people who urgently need them? But without further ado, I know you're eager to find out who has won this debate and who has not, and the judges are ready to actually offer us the verdict for this round. With that, I welcome the chair, Perez, to give us a justification and the call for this round.
Thank you, Mercy. So on a unanimous call, it was team government over team opposition. Why is this the case? The panel valued more of sanctity of preservation of dignity over profits in the long term, and this is the case why. So this house belief is more of a value judgment motion where you're supposed to defend a principle. And in this particular instance, what we got was that these victims might actually survive beyond the problems that they are facing at that moment, be it war, be it floods and things like that. So the implications thereafter at a moment where their privacy was jeopardized is going to be damning, which is very much catastrophic to their privacy and also to their person. With the question asked, according to Declaration of Human Rights, why we are supposed to justify this in the long run. So that is why we thought that government won it over opposition. Thank you.
You have heard it from the judges. St. Paul University has been able to gather for themselves 3 points from this round by winning this debate. This is their second preliminary round, which means they've been able to gather for themselves 4 points in total, and that's a massive win for them. Hopefully, they will not be in the knockout rounds. For side opposition, however, they've been able to get 1 point from this round, but they have debated 2 preliminary rounds, winning their first round and losing their second round, which equally means they have 4 points from the debates that they've been able to gather, which means then they will not be in the knockout rounds following this particular debate. And I know you're eager to find out who will be in the knockout rounds, who will be cut off from the debate, what will happen after this episode, and I'm sure we will do that for you only if you tune in on Monday at 8 p.m. from next week. We have come to the end of the show tonight. We've been able to engage on the whole construct of whether humanitarian organizations are actually justified to show graphic images of people in order for them to get money and finances and donations. At the same time, we've been given an alternative for what humanitarian organizations actually ought to buy into aside from graphic images, and the alternative is infographics. So I think we should all start looking at infographics for us to understand what is happening in these spaces. But that has been the debate. My name is Mercy Vugutsa. I was your host, and before me, we had USIU University versus St. Paul's University. I know you're as eager as I am to watch with us the knockout rounds that are scheduled to happen as from next week. See you next week on Monday, same time, same place.